reading, just getting into the definitions of morals or moral, morality, and then ethics, ethical, and the usage and the differences and just certain things about it. So this is part of my definition series or my read series. With some of these things, some of the best way to actually learn is to read something, read it out loud, to hear, to see it being used. And there's certain terms and things that we use that we kind of innately know what these things are, but we might not actually know the definition, and then we get these things mixed up. But I think morality and morals and ethics and things that are ethical are things that are mixed up. So I'm going to go through 5 different things here. It's going to be 2 definitions from Dictionary.com. It's going to be what's the difference between morality and ethics, or morals and ethics from Dictionary.com. Then I'm going to go to how to use ethics versus morals in grammarists, and then there's going to be the end one will be something from the Makula Center for Applied Ethics from Santa Clara University. It's going to be men and women, justice and compassion. That's going to be more of a practical usage of how these things happen in a sexually dimorphic species, which us human beings are. Could actually differ in how we actually deal with some of these things, the different calculations that we might make that result in some of the problems. As I say often, problems occur not because of what X is, but because of how we define X. So some of the things we define as immoral might be moral to somebody else. So we might be surprised, how is that person doing that? But they have a definition of that. Now we might think, oh, this is ethical, so we shouldn't do it, this is unethical, but somebody else, maybe that's an ethical thing to do. You should do that. I should be expecting this from you. And these are how confusions and mix-ups happen. So anyway, let's start with Dictionary.com. Here's for moral. Adjective. Of relating to or concerned with the principles of rules of right conduct or the distinction between right and wrong, ethical, moral attitudes. Number 2, expressing or conveying truths or counsel as to right conduct, as a speaker or a literary work. Number 3, founded on the fundamental principles of right conduct rather than on legalities, enactment, or custom, moral obligations. Number 4, capable of conforming to the rules of right conduct, a moral being. Noun. Number 9, a moral teaching or practical lesson contained in a fable, tale, experience, etc. Number 10, the embodiment or type of something. I can see more, or sorry, there was more here. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to go back to see more in the adjective, number 5. I was wondering why that number has jumped to like 9. Okay, so conforming to the rules of right conduct, opposed to immoral, a moral man. Number 6, virtuous in sexual matters, chaste. Number 7, of relating to or acting on of the mind, feelings, will, of character, moral support. Number 8, resting upon convincing grounds of probability, virtual, a moral certainty. So just some discussion on the adjective thing. So they're talking about chaste, they're talking about sexual matters, they're talking about the certain behavior things, and some of these are cultural. Some of these are defined by the culture that you're living in. Certain culture, like a moral man. Man itself is not necessarily just moral male. It doesn't go across the board. Man is defined by the cultural. There's the male, then there's man and boys, and then there's masculine. These things are going to differ. The man and boy and the masculine, that's going to differ. Male is a male across cultures, across locations. That's just biology. But the other things are going to be defined. Now there's going to be things connected to that. And as it's mentioned here, this is not about legalities. Laws in general are not all moral. It's preferable if laws are moral to the culture and society that they actually existed, but there is nothing that says a law has to be moral. Like taxation is theft. That's extortion. Okay, so the added one for the noun was morals, principles, or habits with respect to right and wrong. So now there's some quizzes here. Synonyms for moral: upright, honest, straightforward, open, virtuous, honorable. There's also integrity, standards, morality, morals and ethics. Other words for moral: moralless, anti-moral, hypermoral, hypermorally. Words that might be confused with moral: morale or morale. That's I think that's more like your actual feelings, like, oh, my morale is high, so I'm boosted for this day. I'm boosted for this reading. I think this is going to be good because it's part of my definition series, and hopefully absorb more of this information, and maybe some of you can actually learn some stuff. Example sentences from the web for morals: formerly, to impair the morals was a minor So what? Formerly, to impair the morals was a punishable offense. I think morals of a minor. I think. What? Holy homophobia, Batman, a queer reading of The Dark Knight. Come on now. Uh, some believe you need to be taught to disapprove of her morals and ethics. Morals are more important and more valuable than democracy. The entire episode was characters waxing poetic about their morals, which is just about as insufferable as it sounds. So that's it for morals. Did you were you aware of this when you actually thought of morals? Were these the things that you're thinking about? Let's now jump over to ethics and see what's said here. So noun, ethics, used with a singular or plural verb, a system of moral principles, the ethics of a culture. 2. Used with a plural verb, the rules of conduct recognized in respect to a particular class of human actions or a particular group, culture, etc. Medical ethics, Christian ethics. Number 3. Used with a plural verb, moral principles, as of an individual. His ethics forbade betrayal of a confidence. Number 4. Used with a singular verb, that branch of philosophy dealing with values relating to human conduct with respect to the rightness and wrongness of certain actions and to the goodness and badness of the motives and ends of such actions. Compare axiological ethics and deontological ethics. I prefer the deontological ethics, the non-aggression principle, which just says you don't initiate force against people. And yeah, so this is the two differences. You can come check this out for yourself and see. Going into the actual details of this deontological, I think it's one that just follows off of a certain system. Like, okay, this person hasn't initiated force, so you don't initiate force because force is the negative. It's a violation of somebody's freedom and independence. So the things that kind of follow that. Okay, so quiz time, tete-a-tete, origin of ethics, late Middle English, 1400 to 1450. Ethics modeled after Greek, diaetika, neuter plural, or neutral plural. Synonyms for ethics, see morals. So you see that's a similar. But you see ethics, I think, is a system of morals that could be something in there. Morality, I think, is more on a personal basis from my general understanding of this. That doesn't go without the laws. Now, ethics are normally the things that are actually based on, I think laws in general seem to be based on the ethics, and then ethics are general collections of the morals of the people in that location. I think there is a good relation to that. Now, when you see a good balance between those two things, the morality of the people, of the individual people, the ethics that have been agreed upon as a group of those people, and then the laws are based on those and are close to those, then I think you have a generally cohesive and workable society. Words nearby ethics: ethical investment, ethical relativism, ethical will, ethicist, ethicize, ethics, ethinamate. So this is just words, it's not even like related. So here, ethic, no noun. So this is again, it's another different one. The body of moral principles or values governing or distinctive to a particular culture or group. A complex of moral precepts held in the conduct of the following individual. Example of sentences, the web for ethics. Friday, there is ethics and law of war training and instruction. She knows the ethics behind this, and she wants those ethics to be visible on a broad scale. These decisions should not be made in private, but with an ethics committee, he said, a committee. By stepping down, the embattled McCaffrey preempted an ethics investigation that would have cost him his state pension. So that's it. Here's another one. Noun. What's this? What is the British Dictionary definition? So they're going with a few different definitions here. Have they said anything new here that wasn't there below? The moral fitness for decision, course of action is still a noun again. A social, religious, civil code, behavior construct, behavior considered especially that of a particular group, profession, or individual. So yeah. So that's it for the two definitions. You see, ethics is used as a noun, and morals is used as an adjective. There's also a noun version of morals. Okay, so now let's go into what is the difference between morals versus ethics. There's a video here you can watch as well, but let me just read this. Maybe you've heard these terms and wondered what the difference is. A lot of people think of them as being the same thing. While they're closely related concepts, morals refer mainly to guiding principles and ethics refer to specific rules and actions or behaviors. A moral precept is an idea or opinion that's driven by a desire to be good. An ethical code is a set of rules that defines allowable actions of correct behavior. The concepts are similar, but there are some subtle differences. Do you say subtle or subtle? Subtle. What do you say? Anyway, what does morals mean? A person's idea of morals tends to be shaped by their surrounding environment and sometimes their belief system. Moral values shape a person's idea about right and wrong. They often provide the guiding ideas behind ethical systems. That's where it gets tricky. Morals are the basis for ethics. A moral person wants to do the right thing, and a moral impulse usually means best intentions. What does ethics mean? Ethics are distinct from morals in that they are much more practical. An ethical code doesn't have to be moral. It's just a set of rules for people to follow. Several professional organizations, such as the American Bar Association and the American Medical Association, have created specific ethical codes for their respective fields. In other words, an ethical code has nothing to do with cosmic righteousness or a set of beliefs. It's a set of rules that are drafted by trade groups to ensure members stay out of trouble and act in a way that brings credit to the profession. Ethics aren't always moral, and vice versa. It's important to know that what's ethical isn't always what's moral, and vice versa. Omerta, for example, is a code of silence that developed among members of the mafia. It was used to protect criminals from the police. This follows the rules of ethically correct behavior for their organization, but it can also be viewed as wrong from a moral standpoint. A moral action can also be unethical. A lawyer who tells the court that his client is guilty may be acting out of a moral desire to see justice done, but this is deeply unethical because it violates the attorney-client privilege. So is that kind of understandable? So ethics are closer to the laws, and the morals is closer to just your conscience, I would say. I think that's in a general way that I'd want to say that. Let me know if you've had those confusions. I think I've made these mistakes sometimes, and I think reading this is going to help me not make as many of these mistakes. So let's go to the grammarist now, and let's see, this is how to use ethics versus morals. Ethics versus morals. Morals are the principles on which one's judgment of right and wrong are based. Ethics are the principles of right conduct. So the two nouns are closely related and are often interchangeable. The main difference is that morals are more abstract, subjective, and often personal or religious based, while ethics are more practical, conceived, and share principles promoting fairness in social and business interactions. For example, a politician's sex scandal may involve a moral lapse, a subjective judgment, while a politician taking money from a company he's supposed to regulate is an ethical problem. But of course, both ethics and morals may have a part in both situations. Ethics, the word takes plural form but is treated as singular, is also a field of philosophical study. There aren't many college courses on morals, though ethics courses inevitably involve discussions of morals, whereas classes in ethics are required for many degrees, especially in law, business, and medicine. Meanwhile, the difference between ethics and morals is often formulated this way, that ethics are the science of morals, and morals are the practice of ethics. But that's a little too neat and doesn't cover all the ways in which the words are used. Please think of this post as only a summary of concepts. Anyone who has studied these issues closely might have much more to say about what they mean and how they differ. Examples. These little pop-ups and things like that. So in practical usage, the word morals usually applies to principles of right and wrong in practice in personal behavior. For example, many voters, including some who do not share the Salafis' puritanical morals, say they trust the sheiks to understand their perspective for tangible reasons. It's from the New York Times. The Society's scandal sheet, Town Topics, made snide remarks about her morals and reported that she had been indulging freely in stimulants at Newport. It's from Theodore Roosevelt, A Strenuous Life, Kathleen Dalton. And ethics usually applies to the professional and business practices. To professional and business practices, for example, Prince George's County should strengthen its ethics regulations and get tough on government officials who try to make backroom deals. It's PG County. That's close to where I lived in the United States of America for a while. Okay, so professional organizations begin to revise their ethics codes to acknowledge that non-sexual dual relationships are unavoidable in some situations, especially in small communities. TV actress Maureen Lipman launched a scathing attack on the ethics of Channel 4's Jewish Mom of the Year series during a heated debate on Monday night. So that's it. That's it for the different ways of using it. I think that was pretty much a repeat of what was said in the Dictionary.com, but it's good to repeat some of these things to get it over. Now let's just finish this off with the whole practical things from the Markula Center. Now, for applied ethics, I do think there is a difference. There's as I mentioned, there is a difference. Everything that's good for the goose would not be good for the gander, otherwise we would all be geese. Men and women are different. Males and females are different. Then when you go to different cultures and societies, there's going to be different expectations for girls and boys, for young men and young women, for ladies and gentlemen, for men and women, for mothers and fathers. There's going to be differences. And then when you go to like masculine and feminine, there's going to be certain behavioral patterns that are also cultural based, that also have ethics. And it's going to also determine some of your morality, just your general biology and your general life goals to try and reproduce. You're going to have different things, different incentives that are going to shape who you are. These are things that happen. Now, there's genetic aspects, there's biological aspects that could change, where somebody who's male could have certain genetic predilection towards certain other things. They might be smaller, that they're going to have different kind of considerations to have. A woman might be bigger and stronger, she's going to have different considerations to have. You might not be able to have children, then when you get to that point, you realize that early, you're going to have different considerations and develop different actual expectations out of life. Some man might decide and have a certain experience where they don't want to have kids, and then all of a sudden that changes their actual calculations and what they're actually doing in life. So there are all these things to consider. So this I'm going to read this and see if this makes sense to you. You can also come and check and see if they're correct and double check this information. Some of these things I'm not some definitive voice on these things. These are things that I'm sharing that have interest to me, and I hope they have some interest to you, and appreciate you taking your time. Okay, men and women, justice and compassion. Claire Andre and Manuel Vasquez. Put yourself in the position of Michelle, a single mother of 4 children. Michelle's life is a mess. She lives in a crowded 3-room apartment with the 4 kids and her elderly mother, whose medical bills have grown unbearable in the recent months. As Michelle reflects on all these difficulties, she sees a woman draped in fur emerge from a Cadillac. The woman's wallet falls from her purse to the ground, and Michelle picks up the wallet and discovers to her amazement that it is stuffed with $100 bills. She has only an instant to decide whether to chase after the woman or slip the wallet into her own purse. If she returns the money to the woman, who from the looks of it can probably afford to lose it, she will give up a chance to take care of her family responsibilities. But keeping the money isn't fair to the woman, regardless of her financial position. Stealing, after all, is wrong, isn't it? What would you do? Recent research on such ethical dilemmas suggests that when confronted with such choices, good-willed individuals may choose either to return the wallet or keep the money, depending on the ethical perspective that they use to frame the ethical question. What's more, Harvard psychologist Karen Gilligan believes that differences in ethic perspective are related to gender. That is, that men and women follow different but parallel paths of moral development that lead them to make their ethical choice based on different ethical criteria. According to Gilligan, some people base ethical decisions on principles of justice, equality, impartiality, and rights. That is the justice perspective, or this is the justice perspective. But others base their decisions on a care perspective, which the need to preserve relationships and minimize hurt takes precedence over considerations of justice and rights. The care perspective places special significance on attachment and compassion. Gilligan writes, "The moral injunction not to act unfairly towards others and not to turn away from someone in need capture these different concerns. To explain how to separate more perspectives can exist in parallel, Gilligan uses the analogy of an ambiguous figure, well-known phenomenon of visual perception. When looking at a drawing, one viewer may see a vase, for example, while another sees 2 faces in profile, but it is virtually impossible to see both views at the same time. Eventually, Gilligan notes, an observer will probably be able to see both the vase and the faces, but in general, one view will still remain more compelling. Similarly, individuals tend to make their ethical decisions or ethical choices based on one or more of the ethical perspectives, even if they are aware of both possibilities. Gilligan developed her theories about differences in ethical perspective in response to another Harvard psychologist, Lawrence Kohlberg, whose early findings suggested that men more often reached the higher level of moral development than women. Her research then posed challenges not only to other research interests, sorry, blah, 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 blah. Excuse me. Her research then posed challenges not only for other researchers interested in moral development, but also for social scientists exploring the differences between men and women. For other researchers, shouldn't it be? Okay, so this is some editing here. I think. Kohlberg postulated that there were three different levels of moral maturity, and the earliest and least mature level, children, at the earliest and least mature level, children typically define right and wrong in terms of what authority figures tell them is right and wrong, or in terms of what results in reward or punishment. The second level is typical of adolescents who tend to base right and wrong on loyalties to their family and friends. The third and most mature level is achieved when a person comes to rely on universal and abstract ethical principles, such as the principles of justice or equality. That impartiality takes into account the interests of all persons. Gilligan's research over the past 11 years suggests that women tend to be more concerned than men while maintaining good relationships with their family and friends, and in minimizing hurt to those whom they care about. Characteristic of Kohlberg's second level of moral maturity. Men, on the other hand, are more likely to look at moral issues from the standpoint of impartial and impersonal principles, characteristic of the third and most mature level. By implication, then, women appear, according to standards developed by Kohlberg, to reach the third and most mature levels much less frequently than men, and therefore to be less morally developed than men. But Gilligan's work challenges this interpretation. The problem, she claims, is not women, but the theory of moral development that Kohlberg worked out. Kohlberg's theory canonized the justice perspective favored by males because he and most of his subjects were male. Gilligan's research on women revealed, however, that a care perspective could also be a morally mature stage of moral reasoning, but one that is more favored by females. Gilligan's research shows that women, more than men, view themselves as a part of a network of relationships and feel that sustaining these relationships is a moral imperative. Central to this female ethic are notions of care and responsibility for others. By contrast, the male ethic of Kohlberg's third level is one based on abstract and personal principles. Gilligan argues that for most women, progress towards moral maturity is marked by changes in the focus of caring, not by the development of abstract and personal principles that Kohlberg proposes. In the care perspective, the earliest level of moral development, she claims, is one marked by concern with caring only for oneself. At the second level, others become the focus of caring. At the third level, of moral development, the morally mature person achieves a balance between caring for others and caring for oneself. Progress from stage to stage is motivated in part by the individual's increasing understanding of human relationships, and in part by the attempt to maintain one's own integrity and care for oneself without neglecting others. Throughout this process, women regard themselves as selves in relation. At highest level of moral development, right philosophers Diana Mars and Eva Feder-Kete, the care perspective embraces a morality of nonviolence, end quote, and, quote, leads to a universal condemnation of exploitation and hurt, end quote. Gilligan admits, however, that both perspectives are valid, in fact complementary. She argues that a shift in the focus of attention from concerns about justice to concerns about care changes the definition of what constitutes a moral problem, and leads the same situation to be seen in different ways. Theoretically, writes Gilligan, the distinction between justice and care cuts across the familiar divisions between thinking and feeling, egoism and altruism, theoretical and practical reasoning. It calls attention to the fact that all human relationships, public and private, can be characterized both in terms of equality and in terms of attachment, and that both inequality and detachment constitute grounds for moral concern. And Gilligan's work produces a psychological frame that enables us to understand the psychology of the gender gap, observes psychologist Dorothy Austin. By defining a distinctly different mode of moral reasoning, Gilligan allows us to rethink the male notion of patriotic sacrifice and the notion of the other as enemy. That, she says, may help to explain why men are willing to sacrifice their lives in battle, while women are willing to sacrifice themselves to preserve the lives of children. Gilligan's notion about parallel moral perspectives, a recent development in the field of ethics, but already has sparked lively debate, and considerable reflection on old ways of thinking about moral development. So this was in 2015, and as they mentioned, this is something that sparked lively debate, and these are fields. To me, this is the greatest time to be alive. We're passing through the information age to the age of understanding. The whole idea of what is ethical, what is unethical, is cultural relativism. There's certain cultures where it's just worse. It is worse to cut any pieces off of the genitalia of children, whether they be male or female. A culture that does that versus a culture that doesn't on that one thing is treating their children in a less ethical way. It is immoral to do this in both senses. Like, to me, that's a rather clear thing. And these are things that this is not something that's brand new. It's something like peaceful parenting. It seems to be a more ethical way to parent an actual child. To have that rule where you're like, I'm not going to hit this child. I'm not going to violate this child's actual body, being. I'm not going to yell at them. We're going to find better ways to communicate. There's better ways of doing things. And just the differences. We've been men and women. We've been males and females since the beginning of humans. And it's taken so long to actually develop and understand that, hey, maybe we're actually looking at things from a different point of view. Even if you have two male twins standing in the same location, doing everything at the same time, they will be viewing something from a slightly different position. Even if you are reviewing your life, you might do things in a different kind of way. So this whole idea of, oh, we just do the things the same. Yes, with these judgments. You look at the statistics. The guy was doing a test. Kohlberg was doing this test, and most of the people were males in a certain society, so he was ignoring a certain point of view. Just like certain people focus on things, let's just talk about the female point of view on this, and you look at the thing where you're doing the stats on that, you're going to skew that to a certain different way. The just general different concerns. If you are actually concerned, look at the evolutionary environment with the evolutionary psychology. Women in general were more caring about being in the household, being in the cave, being back at the village, caring for the children, having those interpersonal relationships in that sense, maintaining certain relationships and caring and knowing this person's going to do this, picking up on certain physical cues and things like that. They're also smaller. They have to take care of their body and not get into that much confrontation, not react too fast. They also have a situation where their body is valuable in the sense they have the golden uterus. They are the key to reproduction in any culture. If you don't care about you females, you're going to die off pretty quick when you can't actually reproduce. So they have to take better care of their bodies. You look at something that's happened now in society where you have men at jobs where they die 95% or 90 to 95% of workplace deaths are men because they actually go out and they risk their body in order to get access to somebody to provide enough resources to support a female who can reproduce with their children. That's just the transition there. And also men in general are out there. You're out there, you have to fight the actual mammothism. You have to go out to the mammoth, you have to go out to the hunting. You have to have certain set rules that are more set and directed with those ethical principles where you're like, okay, these are abstract rules, but we have to understand, if we're out here stalking this animal, you can't move forward before this other group goes forward. If you do this, you have to have this regimented, set kind of rule thing that is not necessarily set on morals, but is more practical. This is what we have to do, or we are all going to die because we're not going to catch that mammoth and we're all going to starve. Or that mammoth is going to turn around and gouge you in the face. So you need to actually be able to actually follow this. So you have to follow these structured things. So different challenges develops different people. Now, if you had a different society where for some reason it was flipped over and the men were spending most of the time at home, they somehow had some way of men producing milk as well to feed the kids because there's some practical things about it. But you just had a different society where the women were out there hunting more, they would have something. Maybe if you looked at lions and there was some kind of way of developing morality where it seems like the female lionesses actually do end up going hunting more, but then I don't know how much the female lionesses hunt when they're actually, because the males are supposed to be the ones who are actually defending them. If another male comes, they normally get in the fight and defend in that kind of sense. There's security. But I think when the female lionesses, maybe because it's several lionesses, so it makes more sense for the several lionesses to go out and actually hunt, because you don't have packs of lions where there's multiple males. So maybe if you have more like polygamous, there's more females in the action thing. Anyway, so I'm just thinking, if you can think of a situation where it was flipped over, then maybe you'd have a situation where the females coming from that culture seem to be more towards ethics and that kind of structure, and then the males in that culture seem to be more towards like the morality and the interpersonal relationships. But anyway, so that's it for the reading. Thank you for coming to listen. I hope you appreciated it. I learned some stuff from this. I think this is good material. I've heard separate ones with the men and women in justice and the levels of morality. That thing did sound kind of sketchy. It's a different kind of thing. As I mentioned, different cultures are going to have different kind of levels. Some people want different things. Some other people want different results. In general, society is the playground of men. That is done normally to construct a culture and environment that is protective of the females. This is from my observation. You can tell me where I'm going wrong here. And the females seem to have more of a guidance, or their theater, their arena was historically, traditionally, the home. And that was also a lot of influence. They talk about behind every good man is a great woman. And, you know, some of those situations where you find like a man is able to achieve a lot more once they've actually achieved somebody to actually give them access to reproduce. They have that comfort, and that female is producing for the basics. For the basics, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They know the home is dealt with. The kids are okay. If I get home, I'm going to be able to eat. Then they're free to actually go out in the social sphere and do a lot more, produce a lot more in that sense. So they have that complementary relationship. So I think there is an aspect there where the things work together. So the man is going to be more developed on one level of maturity in ethics and morality, and the female is going to be in a different one because her sphere is different in general. As I was mentioning with the whole reproductive processes, and different things happen for the same reason, the same things happen for different reasons. Anyway, so that's it for now. Like, share, subscribe. Links below to our merchandise store. This is part of my definition series. You can check out part of that playlist as well, which is going to have other definitions of other things, where some of them I just go into the actual basic details, and some of them I go into more detailed things where I'm talking about actual articles and usage and things like that that might be interesting to you as well. I think the one I did before I post this one, Word itself, which I think was rather interesting, which I think some of you may not be aware of the actual interesting history about capitalism, and there is something about, there might have been some appropriation of that word from socialists and then privatization. That's a little kind of spoiler. Goodbye.